When Islam Makhachev fought Arman Tsarukyan, it wasn't supposed to be the beginning of a rivalry. It was an unplanned clash that the UFC put together out of necessity. Islam was originally scheduled to compete in Russia, but with no willing opponents on short notice, the UFC looked toward someone relatively unknown but promising, young, talented fighter from Armenia named Arman Tsarukyan. With a solid record and a fearless attitude, Arman stepped in on less than a week's notice. What followed was one of the most high-level grappling fights we'd seen in years. But because neither man had much name recognition at the time, the bout flew under the radar. In hindsight, this was a meeting between two future elite contenders, possibly even champions, and the fight aged incredibly well. Back then, Islam wasn't the dominant, feared force we know today. He was just another Dagestani with Khabib Nurmagomedov in his corner, trying to make his name in the sport. But his skills were undeniable: smooth striking, relentless pressure, and a suffocating ground game. Against Arman, he met someone who wasn't afraid of that pressure. Someone who could match his pace and had the gas tank to survive 3 grueling rounds. From the very first takedown exchange, you could see both fighters were on another level. Arman, just 22 years old, was making his UFC debut, and instead of being overwhelmed, he leaned into the chaos, reversing positions, scrambling back to his feet, and even threatening with his own grappling. The fight quickly turned into a back-and-forth wrestling clinic, and it was a refreshing change of pace from the typical striker versus grappler dynamic. Despite being thrown into the deep end, Arman showed the kind of composure that suggested this wouldn't be a one-off. He didn't just survive, he made Islam work for every moment of control. He sprawled, scrambled, and got up from positions where others would have been finished. Islam ultimately got the decision win, but it wasn't easy. He edged it with slightly more control time and cage dominance, but Arman had his moments. It was the kind of loss that doesn't hurt your stock, it raises it. People inside the sport took notice. Fighters, coaches, and analysts saw what Arman did in that cage, and they knew he was going to be a problem down the line. Over the years, the significance of that fight grew. Islam went on a tear, climbing the ranks and eventually becoming the lightweight champion. Arman, meanwhile, quietly built his own resume. He improved in every area, sharpening his striking, tightening his wrestling, and turning into one of the most well-rounded fighters in the division. He didn't get the same push or media attention, but real fans knew he was coming. Every win brought him one step closer to a rematch with the man who handed him his first UFC loss. And the rematch, if and when it happens, will no longer be a short notice, thrown together affair. It'll be a main event, a marquee fight, a possible title bout. What makes this potential rematch so fascinating is how both men have evolved. Islam has become more methodical and strategic. He's no longer just a pressure wrestler. He's a complete, mixed martial artist with knockout power and high fight IQ. Arman, on the other hand, has become more explosive, more unpredictable, and more aggressive in his scrambles. He doesn't just defend takedowns. He punishes you for trying. He's shown he can fight 5 hard rounds, and he's hungry for that revenge. It's no longer veteran versus prospect hits, elite versus elite. Looking back, the first fight wasn't just a fun. Scrap It was a preview. We didn't know it at the time, but we were watching the early chapter of a long-term rivalry, one that could define this generation of lightweights. And when the rematch eventually happens, it won't just be about who wins, it'll be about who has grown more, who has learned more, and who is truly the best lightweight on the planet. Ask ChatGPT.